Now we're recording. There we are. Okay, so we're gonna follow through the Gemara and see if it tells us one way or the other. And the Gemara is going to bat it back and forth to look at different sources from both points of view. So we'll go from the top. Excuse me. I'm getting emotional. No. A bit emotional. Right. From both of them together, we will learn. That's from Reb Shimon and Rabbanon, who had a discussion about whether when you are helping somebody to load or unload the donkey, is it for pay? Is it for free? And they had a bit of a discussion about that. But bottom line was that they both looked at the sources, acknowledging a common fact, which is that there is a more urgent need to unload an animal than to load it. And this is based on the assumption that unloading an animal is more urgent because we want to prevent the animal from suffering. And if the animal is already unloaded and just goes to load it up again, well, now the animal is not suffering because its load is on the ground, so it's fine. And it needs to be loaded in a proper way, obviously, so that it can proceed in a good way. But when you unload an animal, that is regarded by both Rav Shimon and the Rabbanon in the previous Gemara as being the more urgent thing because the animal is suffering. So the Gemara said, oh, look, just along the way there, we've learned that both Rav Shimon and the Rabbanon assume that stopping animal from suffering is a Torah requirement. How about that? Okay, good thing to know. So that's how our Gemara begins. From the words of both of them, we learn that the concept of suffering for animals is acknowledged in the Torah. He doesn't quite go with the Rabbanon because he says that the way to understand the psukim, the verses, is not quite clear, and therefore we've got to accommodate them in a certain way. But Masai Mikrai, if according to Rav Shimon we could understand exactly what the verses about loading and unloading meant, then Doshin and Kavachemer, he would agree with the Rabbanon that we could learn from those verses that, or we would interpret those verses based on the assumption that there is a more urgent need to unload than to load, because unloading an animal prevents it from suffering. That's what we found in previous learnings. So the Gemara says, well, okay, fine. My love, now in the fourth line down on 32b in Bava Metsia. My love, is it not Mishum Tzar Balechaim, Doshinon? Is it not that we take the need to unload an animal to be more urgent and more required in Jewish law because we want to prevent suffering to the animal? So the Gemara says, maybe not. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, 5 lines down, second word in. No, maybe. Maybe the idea of an animal suffering is not acknowledged in Jewish law. And the reason why we're more urgent to unload than to load is because if we fail to unload the animal, then that's going to cause harm to the owner, because this poorly loaded or overloaded animal is going to be damaged by the unwieldy, unreasonable load, and you're going to have the owner of the animal suffering financial loss. So maybe the urgency of unloading and the preeminence we give to unloading the animal over reloading it is not because we're concerned for the animal's suffering, but rather we're concerned to prevent financial harm to the owner of the animal, because if the animal is left loaded in a bad way, it's going to be damaged, and then the owner will no longer be able to use it as a beast of burden and have to buy more. So it's chisron kis, it's lost to your wallet. So what chisron kis means, rather than tzar balechaim, paying for an animal.
It's the same thing that when it looks in Israel, the cow farms, they will move the cow on Shabbos and then get the milk. They don't make any money. They can certainly milk.
Yes, no. There it's tzar balechaim. There, it's because the animal will suffer if it needs milking and it can't.
They don't let the cow could die. They milk it. Isn't the same
Oh, I
thing
see.
by financial
Oh,
loss?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if failing to milk a cow would cause financial loss to the cow's owner. Maybe it does. I always assumed it was Sabbath time, that the animal from suffering. But we're gonna have to work through all of this to find out whether indeed Sabbath is a problem in the Torah. So we'll come to that. So the Hochik on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 6 lines now down now. In like the Hochik on, and thus it says, if you're obliged to load an animal, even where there's no financial loss, then all the more so the previous Gemara was saying that the unloading an animal is more urgent, not because it prevents the animal from suffering, but because it prevents the owner of the animal from suffering a financial loss. Well, we can look at it in two ways. That's it. And the Gemara is saying, which way should I look at it? Should I see unloading as more urgent because it stops the animal suffering? Or should I see unloading as more urgent because it prevents damage to the owner?
Use the belt as one of the belt's
could be it's both, but all the Gemara is seeking to do now is saying, you think that this proves that Tzad by Nechaim is a Torah requirement. It's not so simple. It could be both. It could be Tzad by Nechaim, but could not be.
But what about when we say if you have an animal, you have a dog in the house or a cat, and you have to, when you get up in the morning, feed the animal before you feed yourself?
That's down the line. At the moment, we don't know that. The Gemara is, like it does so many times, it conceals what it knows because it wants us to work through to the conclusion. We actually, sorry?
No,
absolutely. But there again, it could that. I mean, we'll have to look at all the sources the Gemara brings. But all the Gemara has to do is say maybe not, and then it's no longer a proof. That's how this ticks. As long as I can read it a certain way to avoid that conclusion, you have no proof. So Gemara is not saying you're definitely wrong. Gemara is just saying you have no proof from here. That's all it's trying to do, and it does it again and again and again.
According to your and I think you're right, but you could be wrong.
That's right. Exactly. So I'm not saying you're wrong, but you got no proof from it. That's exactly it. Yeah, and that's the Gemara word. Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now we are 7 lines down, the last word on the line. So the Gemara says, everybody agrees from the previous Gemara that unloading is more urgent because, but we don't know why. So the Gemara wanted to prove that the fact that unloading is regarded as higher priority is proof that we care about animal suffering. Gemara said no, maybe it's more urgent because we care about stopping the financial loss to the owner. And if we leave this load on the animal when it's the wrong thing for the animal to have it, that's going to harm the animal. So maybe that's what makes it more urgent. So it's common ground that unloading is a more urgent thing. That there's no dispute about. And
you've got to be just as careful when you're loading, regarding that loading in a way it should be, not that heavy for an animal. Whatever, you've got to do it in a way that it makes it less of a burden for it, and also that if it's not loaded correctly and it falls off, this financial loss to the owner.
So you're saying that
we got to be as careful when we're loading, as saying it's not so much about.
But if you're loading, you've got more control over the situation. When you're unloading, all you've got is an animal which is suffering from the extent of its load. When you're loading, you can put a bit here, you can put a bit there, you can have a look. So actually,
you have to be very careful about how you load it. So the animal should feel as
but the urgency is to relieve the pain to the animal, which is already overloaded. And therefore, that obviously
all right. I'm talking about when you load, and also if you don't load it properly or you do it hastily, there's the financial loss as well.
The Gemara is going to say a similar thing in a minute. But just to get this clear, I think that the Gemara looks at it like, you could say that perspective, but the Gemara looks at it slightly differently, which is that clearly Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan both see the mitzvah of unloading as more important. Why is it more important? So yes, you're right. The loading has to be done in a proper way. But the urgency is in unloading because the animal is suffering now, or the animal is suffering damage now. That's why there's urgency in that part. Whereas when it comes to loading, you can take your time because, of course, if someone says you'll load properly, because that's what people normally do. But the urgency is in the unloading. That's where time is of the essence. I think that's the point. Okay. But I hear that distinction. Okay. So the Gemara says, are you telling me then that if we look at it not in terms of the animal suffering, but in terms of financial loss, there's only financial loss only the urgency regarding financial loss is only about unloading, but not about loading. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're telling me, says the Gemara? That there's an urgency when it comes to unloading the animal, because now the animal is bearing this unwieldy load and it's going to damage its back and it won't be able to carry it anymore. But when it comes to loading, the Gemara says, you're telling me that there's no rush because the animal is now not being damaged. So that's why if you look at it in terms of financial loss, you're telling me that unloading is urgent, but reloading is not urgent. Is that what saying, Gemara says? And we nod sagely and say, yes, that's what we are saying. And the Gemara says, that's not true. You're wrong. I get it when it comes to relieving animal suffering. Unloading is much more urgent than reloading. When it comes to preventing financial loss, they're about level pegging.
Well, are they? Because the owner has no use of the animal when it's not loaded to go and do whatever he wants it to do. So therefore, there is more of an urgency in loading to prevent financial loss for the owner.
Well, the Gemara's point is that there's urgency both ways. There's urgency in unloading to prevent financial loss and urgency in loading to prevent financial loss. And yet previously we saw there's a greater urgency in unloading. That's the only principle that we've derived from the previous Gemara. Why is it that loading, when it comes to financial loss, is just as urgent as unloading? You tell me.
Because you can't use the animal when it's not loaded.
So what? Why is that financial loss too?
Yeah. So you could be transporting
Yes.
Go on.
25 kegs of wine to Fred who he's going to sell it to, but he can't do it. I mean, the wine's on the
Good, because that you shake fair. Yeah, that's one explanation. Give me another reason why loading could be just as urgent as unloading when it comes to financial loss. What happens if I don't load this stuff up PDQ and get on with it?
He could be using again money because the guy wants in a certain place.
You need to sell it. That's what he's saying.
Another load after that.
Okay, so time is money because I'm in delivery business. But give me an entirely different reason. Think security. That's right. If your donkey is standing on the road and the load is in disarray and it's all over the place, then anyone can just run off with it. So the Gemara says, one thing we know, that unloading is more important than loading. If you say that's because it's Tsar Baalei Chayim, well and good, we understand that. If you say that's because of financial loss, and there's no such thing as Tsar Baalei Chayim in the Torah, not true, because they're both equally urgent. So looking at it with your financial loss glasses, it all falls apart. Looking at it with your Tsar Baalei Chayim glasses, it works very well. QED? That's what I was going to say. So clearly the Gemara says only the Tsar Baalei Chayim approach works, not the financial loss approach. Not just wrong, with respect, it's just a lot of rubbish. So let's see this in the Gemara. Yeah.
That's down to you. You didn't slow it. Safely enough for this not to happen.
You're right. But the whole mitzvah here of helping an animal in distress or helping an animal with a dodgy road is that we have a certain tolerance for that. That if the to use the old German expression, if the owner of the donkey is a kamuffle and he just botches the loading the donkey, we'll help a fella out.
But if the load is shed from the donkey, how are we helping the donkey? It's not less unexpected.
Yeah, but there's a balance here because the donkey would just like to sort of gamble in the fields and never do a day's work in his life. But no, it is a beast of burden and it is reasonable.
I would say the loss would be down to the owner to not security.
So you're kind of right, but clearly the Torah says otherwise. Okay. Although Rabbi Yosef clearly agrees with you when the load is too big. Rabbi Yosef says when the load is too big and it's unreasonable, then you have a lesser obligation, or perhaps no obligation to help. But even then, it's not clear. Not clear. What exactly Rabbi Yosef is saying?
Well, when you say, am I obligated if I see the animal is shedding its load and the owner is disappointed? Am I obligated to help, or just say that somebody?
No, you must help. You must help.
I must help.
Yeah, help. That's what Gemara says.
So then, do I say because I'm now going to be maybe an hour late to work and I will get docked and an hour off my wages?
Yeah.
Then I say you're the owner. Can I say right? But you have to realize this is going to take an hour. I'll help you because it's my obligation and it's all right.
Yeah.
But you have to give me like 45
wages. Yeah,
that 45 pounds an hour.
That is all between Rabbanan and Shimon in certain cases when it comes to loading.
But I'm just saying, if the guy says, "Oh, I can't to pay you that," we'll say, "I'm sorry, according to Torah, I've done what I want, but I can't afford to lose this. Family and
basically it's a machlokes.
So we have to get there.
Yeah. Well, that's Shulchan Aruch. So that will have to do with way down the line.
To the journey.
Indeed, it's not the get. It's not the getting there. It's the taking part. Okay. Okay. So, okay. So the Gemara says. So we now are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 like that. You're telling me that loading a donkey won't prevent the owner from having a financial loss. That's not true. Milo Askinon, all we're not dealing with this is the famous argument. While if you don't get on with loading this animal up again, then the owner is suffering financial loss even with loading. Because he needs to get to the market to do business or to deliver it, whatever it is. And now he can't because you're busy faffing about and all this donkey stuff is all over the place. Inami, alternatively, also or bandits will come and carry off the lot. Teidan the Gemara says, work out from here, you shall know from here, that the notion of care for animal suffering is minatera. So again, we have Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon who both agree that the obligation to unload is greater and simpler to work out. If you want to say that's because it's Tzar Baalei Chaim, then that makes sense. If you want to say it's because of financial loss, it doesn't make sense because the financial loss is just as great when it comes to loading as it comes to unloading. When it comes to unloading, you're worried for the well-being of the animal that it will get damaged and you won't be able to use it anymore. When it comes to loading, if you don't load it up, the guy is also going to suffer a loss because he's not going to be able to go to market and do his job. And you leave it open to bandits to nick the stuff. Therefore, the Gemara says, this presumption of Rav Shimon and Rabbanan that unloading is more urgent only works if we look at it from the point of view of animal suffering. So clearly, Rav Shimon and Rabbanan both say that animal suffering is something that is acknowledged in the Torah. And therefore, the urgency of unloading, overloading makes sense and everything's fine. But look at it from the point of view of financial loss, it's a lot of rubbish because it's all financial loss, both unloading and loading. So you can't say that unloading is more urgent, which they clearly do say, unless you look at it from the point of view of Tzar Baalei Chaim, animal suffering.
But why would you be unloading? If you're unloading, you've been to the market, you've sold what you sold, you've brought back what you haven't sold, so of course you unload it.
Well, it could be on the way to market for all we know. That's for starters. And the owner set off at 8 a.m. to get to the market for 9 a.m. and then 8:30, the whole load is skew with and you know, and so he's got to unload it. You're going to help him. Even on the way home, still, you know, he's got to get it home. And if it's all over the place and he can't get it home properly, then it's going to be trouble. Both for the donkey and for him. So again, we've got the two levels. But the Gemara has now shown us that if we look at it from the point of view of financial loss, then Reb Shimon and Rabbanon's presumption that unloading is more urgent does not work. But if you look at it from the point of view of animal suffering, it does work. Therefore, clearly, what's in the back of the minds all along is animal suffering.
But you're still suffering a loss if you only went to the market and somehow all of the donkeys carrying it's sort of gone to one side.
Yeah.
And it's walking like it's lame.
Yeah.
So you've got lots of time trying to sort that.
Yes, absolutely. But even coming home, you know, you're still worried about bandits on the way home. Sure. You know, the bandits don't mind whether they're on the way to or from anyway. They just want the stuff. Okay, so I'm sorry, I misread the last bit. Now the Gemara is going to bring another proof. Teda. So the Gemara says you should know that so that in fact animal suffering is acknowledged in the Torah law. In Torah law. So now we're going to bring a second proof. Firstly, we've had the fact that our previous discussion of Rabbanan only worked if you acknowledge the notion of tzar b'alechaim. Now we're going to have another proof that tzar b'alechaim, animal suffering, is recognized in Jewish law as something to be prevented. Why? The Ketani Sefer, because the end of our Mishnah says, Rabbi Yosef Glili says, Im haya alav yes amasai ein zakuk lo. If the donkey has been overloaded, it's got too much on its back, and no reasonable person would load the donkey to this extent, then what's the din? Ein zakuk lo. You don't have to help it. Shenema, as it says, tachas masai, that you see the donkey struggling under its burden. Masu sheyocher lamed. That means if it's struggling under a burden that is its burden, a burden that is suitable for it, then that's fine. But if it is a burden that is unsuitable for donkey because it's too big, then you're not obliged to help it. Says Rabbi Yosef Glili. Fine. Lav miklal, will I not work out from there? The Tanakama Soma Zokuglo, that the Tanakama holds that even though the burden is too great for the donkey, you must help it. My time, or what's the reason? Lav mishum the tzar b'alechaim deraisa. Is it not? Obviously, because never mind Rabbi Yosef Glili, he's a minority opinion. The main opinion says, of course you got to help the donkey, even if it's overloaded and it's the owner's fault entirely, as you were saying before. Why so? Why must you help the donkey, even though the owner has grossly overloaded it? Open and shut case. So we can work out from Rabbi Yosef Glili, this minority opinion, what the Tanakama, the first main opinion in the Mishnah, which is that even though the owner is at fault, we still help. Why do we help? Because the donkey is suffering there, and therefore
it's going to suffer even more by you helping to do it, and it's still overloaded.
Oh, we're talking about unloading.
Oh, what?
So an unloaded donkey. That's so Rabbi Yosef Glili said if he overloaded his donkey, that's on him. But
if you saw the donkey is shed its load, and you think to yourself, my goodness, how could it be put all that onto the donkey?
Yeah.
Do I have to help him load it, or no? Because he shouldn't have put that.
That again is argued. The Rabbi Yosef Glili says no. Tanakama says maybe, but clearly here we're talking about unloading. All we know for now is that the Tanakama says, the first opinion says you must unload the donkey, even though it's overloaded. And Rabbi Yosef Glili says no, you don't. Why did Tanakama say you must unload the donkey, even though the owner was at fault? Because you care about a donkey.
But I'm saying if it shed its load in the road before he's got to wherever he's going.
Yeah.
And you see that donkey has been grossly outgreed his grocery, and you feel, I'm not going to help him make that donkey suffer more.
Right.
Am I right or wrong?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't want to go there. Okay. All right. So the Gemara says, you think this is a proof that Saba Elochaim is Min Torah? You're wrong. It's not a proof. We'll have to find out how next week. So I'm thanking. I got to you now. I got to get away. You're saying thank you everybody for coming. You say can I know we did very well. Baruch Hashem, we did well. Thank you. Thank you, Yagi.
Thank you, Rafa. Thank you. See you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for coming. That's okay.
Thank you. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.